Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the Movement Network with Bart. And today we're going to talk about the second hottest division in the boxing world. If you haven't watched my video that I did last week about the lightweight division, 135 pounds, and why, in my opinion, it's the best division in boxing, I named it, in case you want to go back and watch it, the Four Horsemen: Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, and Devin Haney. And we do have other fighters there like Vasily Lomachenko, Luke Campbell, which he lost to Ryan Garcia, and Jorge Linares. But you should go back and watch that video. But today we're going to talk about the second hottest division in the whole boxing, and who's going to be the top 147 pounder in the upcoming future. So who am I going to talk about today? Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman, and Yordenis Ugas. I will not be mentioning the following fighters. Manny Pacquiao does not make this list simply because he's on his way out. We all know he's one of the best fighters ever to lace up a pair of gloves, but unfortunately, Manny Pacquiao, he's on his way out, and it's time to enjoy the new blood coming out there. I'm also not here. I'm not going to mention what's his name. Virgil Ortiz Jr. simply because he's still too young. He still needs a couple, according to him and his own fight trainer, Robert Garcia, he still needs a couple more fights before he goes off and take on the harder opposition. So let's get started. First, I want to talk about Shawn Porter. So Shawn Porter, 31 fights, 17 KOs, 3 losses, and one draw. He does have a draw. I always forget that he has a draw. So his last fight did pretty good. It was a stay busy fight. He fought for Mola, and he won by unanimous decision. Before that, he lost to Errol Spence Jr., lost to Keith Thurman, and Kell Brooks. So I think those are his only 3 losses. But he's beating a lot of great fighters out there. Danny Swift Garcia, Adrian Broner, Andre Berto. I mean, he's beaten a lot of great fighters out there. So moving forward, I do think that Shawn Porter's a great fighter, but he is not the best at 147 pounds. He's not the best. And every time he steps up with an A-plus fighter like Errol Spence Jr. and who else? Keith Thurman and Kell Brooks, he always seems to lose. And I do know he beat, Danny Garcia and Adrian Broner, but Adrian Broner had no business in that weight class. And I do think that Danny Swift Garcia is still struggling. He's still struggling with 147 pounds. He hasn't had a good win since God knows when. Now let's talk about who's next. Let's talk about Yordenis Ugas. So Ugas first was rumored to fight next Errol Spence Jr. This is a great fight. Ugas 26 fights, 12 losses, 26 fights, 12 KOs, and 4 losses. Last time we saw him was against Ramos. It's a good fight. It's a decent fight. Ugas got a tendency, if you leave him alone, he's going to give you a boring fight. Ugas is from the old Cuban class, which they could care less how they look as long as they win. And hopefully someday, somehow, some other day, he's going to look good. But if you let Ugas do his thing, he's going to bore you to death. He lost against Shawn Porter. Who else? Robles. And his first loss was against Johnny Garcia. I remember that fight. He lost against Johnny Garcia. Has Ugas ever been KO? No, he hasn't. He hasn't been KO, not even once. Ugas, great talent. I would love to see the fight with him and Errol Spence Jr., even though I do think Errol Spence Jr. will be ultimately, he's gonna win. There ain't no buts and bots about it. He did an amazing job. Errol Spence Jr., last time we saw, he did an amazing job, and there's no reason why he should not be Yordenis Ugas. Now let's move on to Keith one-time Thurman. At one time, I had Keith Thurman as my favorite fighter in the past, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. I love Keith Thurman. He's from Florida. I'm from Florida. Love Keith Thurman, 29 fights, 22 KOs, and one loss. You better not duck me, son. We all remember that about him. So that one loss came by the hands of Manny the Pac-Man Pacquiao, which it was a tough fight. I lost money in that fight, first of all, because I thought Thurman was gonna stop him, stop Manny Pacquiao, and a lot of people kept on giving me hell for saying that Manny Pacquiao was gonna get stopped by Keith Thurman. But Manny Pacquiao record 62 fights, 39 KOs, 7 losses, 3 KOs out of those 7 losses, and 2 draws. And we will always remember how he went down with Juan Manuel Marquez, and he just laid there for a couple minutes. So in my mind, I was thinking, if Juan Manuel Marquez can knock him out, then Keith Thurman should be able to knock him out. But in boxing, as you know, styles make fight, and that never took place. Then I want to talk about who's next. I think, who am I missing? I'm missing Terence Bud Crawford. So Terence Bud Crawford is in a bad position with Top Rank. We all know that Bob Arum keeps on saying negative things about Terence Crawford, things such as losing money, nobody wants to see him, and all this other crazy stuff. Terence Crawford, 37 fights, 28 KOs, no losses. Now, Terence Crawford, I don't know, man. He's one of those fighters you can't overlook, man. I mean, I had him for a little while as my top pound for pound best fighter. He was my top best boxer. I always had him above Vasily Lomachenko. Last time we saw Terence was against Kell Brook, and we all know how that ended. We know what he did to Amir Khan. We know what he did to Jeff Horn after Jeff Horn gave he didn't beat him, in my eyes at least, but what the judges gave a free belt to Jeff Horn once he fought Manny Pacquiao. Okay, so the fight here, that 147-pound fight that everybody wants to see, is Terence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr., the truth. So for me, the reason you're watching this video is because you want to see my prediction, who's going to win. So Terence Bud Crawford, 37 fights, 28 KOs, 0 losses. And Errol Spence Jr., 27 fights, 21 KOs, no losses. Last time we saw him against Danny Swift Garcia, and boy, did he look good. I mean, he did get gas at the end, but boy, did he look good, especially coming out of the huge car crash. He beat Sean Porter, Mikey Garcia, Ocampo, Lamar Peterson, Kell Brook, and the list goes on and on and on. But the first time we saw Errol Spence really look good. Well, he always kind of looked good, but the first time that he caught, especially when this fight happened at HBO, and everybody was, wow, they loved him. You know what? I don't know if this fight actually happened at HBO. It could have. It was against Chris Algieri. Chris Algieri, that was in 2016, I believe, when he beat the living breaks out of Chris Algieri. Anyway, I think it happened at Showtime or HBO, one or the other. Anyway, my prediction for the fight. So first of all, let's talk about the 147 division. The 147 division has a lot of talent, a whole bunch of talent. It's the second best division in boxing, the lightweight, and then easily comes the 147-pound division. And we have Terence Crawford. I think ESPN had Terence Crawford as number 1, and then Errol Spence Jr. number 2. Then they got Manny Pacquiao. Then they get, for me at least, it gets a little blurry. I know we got Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, Danny Swift Garcia, Virgil Ortiz, Yordenis Ugas, Sergey Libinets, which, you know, after Virgil Ortiz, right, which I do think he's number 8 last time I saw him, it don't really matter. We got James and we got some others. But at the end of the day, with the dust clear at 147-pound division, the one man that, well, before I say his name, the two guys that are going to be duking it out will be Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. Now, I do know that, you know, Virgil Ortiz is on his way up, but it's still too early for him. The one fighter that's going to stand there and be the top, the cream of the top, even though for me it's hard to say, but he's starting to have problems. Well, not really. He's not having problems with the weight, but he's talking about moving up and fighting Canelo. But unfortunately, the one fighter that for me is going to be the cream of the top is going to be Errol Spence Jr. Okay? Now, the truth, Errol Spence Jr. for me, even though when I say this, a lot of people don't believe me, or either they criticize me for it or call me a hater, but I do see Errol Spence Jr. beating Terrence Bud Crawford. There's something about me watching the fight, watching Terrence Bud Crawford fight and watching Errol Spence Jr. fight, that I think Errol has that wicked body shot, one, and two, that pressure, positive pressure that he puts. And then seeing how Terrence Bud Crawford, you know, his opposition hasn't been up there for some reason. For me, at least, his opposition, you know, it's tricky because Top Rank has been protecting him. And then we saw him hurt. We saw him hurt against Yuriorkis Gamboa. We saw him hurt. And then at the beginning of the fight with Kell Brooks, his last fight, Kell Brooks was doing amazing. Kell Brooks was doing pretty well. It wasn't until Kell Brooks started lollipopping around, got caught, was a crazy hook, and then Kell Brooks is a shot fighter anyway, and we all know what happened. But I do think that Errol Spence Jr. will beat any other fighter 147 pounds. Thank you guys for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, let me know what you liked and what you didn't like about it. And catch you guys in the next one. Peace.